Little bit of breaking news today as Derrick McClendon, Florida State's starting defensive end opposite Jared Verse, intends to put his name into the NCAA's transfer portal. Now, this does not come as a huge surprise to us. I got a call about this earlier this week. I let our Patreon members know that this is likely the route that things were going to go. A link to the Patreon and Discord so that you don't miss out on early information is included down in the description. But I'm not going to spin this as some massive positive for FSU. I know that we're super positive. I know that we usually are the positive spin outlet, but this is a loss. And Derrick McClendon was a really good player. I want to share a couple of takeaways. I want to share a couple of thoughts, and I want to talk about that room going forward. I don't think it's positive, but I also don't think it's the end of the world by any means at all. I don't think Florida State's nervous. I don't think Florida State's in trouble. I don't think there's any concern in that building right now, even with this news that has come out. First of all, I wish DMac the very best wherever he lands. I know he met with Coach Norvell. I know he took time away from the program to make this decision, and I applaud him for that. I'm glad that he didn't make a super emotional, rushed, rash decision. I'm glad that he took time to do what he felt was best for him. And I think he's doing what he thinks is best for him. I've also been told by a direct source with knowledge this isn't necessarily NIL related. He had a pretty good NIL package based on what I've been told. He agreed to a deal and then announced that on his social media with the battle's end earlier in the year. And so I don't really think this is a massive NIL play. I think there are other things that may go into this. I've got two major takeaways here, and I'm going to share both of those in just a second. I do want to tell you about a new perk that's coming for our members of the channel. We talked about that Discord, that Patreon earlier where we shared this info. All members of the channel are now going to get access to the Discord. YouTube is now linked up with Discord to where we can offer that. You may already have the access, but if you don't yet, we will be making that available. It kind of depends on when this video comes out. It is a pre-record. We're not here live with you in the moment that Derrick put his info into the portal. You'll get early access to commitments, coaching news, realignment, stuff like this and more. Go ahead and check it out. My first takeaway here is that FSU is honestly going to be just fine. Jared Verse is going to anchor the edge position at Florida State this year. My understanding is that McLendon, Payton, and South Carolina transfer Gilber Edmond would have all been in the rotation or in the two deep for that second position, that other defensive end spot. Obviously, Verse having things pretty locked down, being the best defensive end in the country. But I think those other guys would have been in that mix, Pat, Derrick, and Gilber. I think that there may have been some frustration with other guys rising up, other guys getting more snaps, Mike Norvell and that staff wanting to rotate that defensive line as much as they possibly can. You've also got Turner in there as well who can mix it up. You've got young guy Boots in there. You've got some other people in that room that can also mix it up. So I don't think the Noles are in any trouble. Worst case, you've also got Dennis Briggs, who you could pull back in from the inside and put out at defensive end. I don't think that'll be necessary. I don't think you'll need to do that. But I still believe they have the best defensive end room in the conference. I don't think McClendon leaving impacts that. I think it does impact the depth, but they have a very solid rotation of vets and newcomers. McClendon transferring certainly does impact that depth, but it doesn't impact how effective that room is. I really like the additional reps that Payton, who you've seen some highlights here on the screen of, I really like the way that he's going to get more playing time. Obviously, as the ACC Freshman of the Year, he's got an insane amount of talent, and seeing more there is not going to upset anybody. I'm also super, super high on Gilber Edmond and have been since he transferred in from South Carolina. There's a reason both UF and LSU wanted him so badly and why that was such a big, big get for Mike Norvell and this staff. I think that that's going to be big for the Noles, and I'm excited to see what Edmond is able to do. The bigger takeaway here probably speaks to the culture at FSU. I've spoken with a couple of folks close to the situation, close to the program, and I believe ultimately there was some frustration on both sides with how this came to happen and the reasons for why all of this went down. Let me give some love to our friends over at Garnet and Gold just before I get into that. garnetandgold.com. If you're an FSU fan, if you've watched this much, you are an FSU diehard. Go to garnetandgold.com. Make sure that's the only place you're doing your shopping for FSU gear, athletic clothing, Nole memorabilia, whatever you're looking for, they will take care of you. You can use code NOSLAW. That's NOSLAW. We've got it there down at the bottom of the screen. It's in the description as well. NOSLAW to get 15% off your order at garnetandgold.com. Appreciate them. Appreciate their support. Appreciate all they do for us. Can't wait to get back up there for the spring game and do some, put a hurt on my wallet at Garnet and Gold. Make sure you're ordering online and using the code to save 15%. Back to the culture. No matter who is at fault or feels like someone did the other side wrong, guys have to be bought into what Mike Norvell and his staff are doing. And I truly believe, after talking with some people, that Mike Norvell could have potentially convinced DMac to stay at FSU. But is that what was best for Florida State? Is that what is best for the defensive end room? Is that even what's best for Derrick McClendon? I don't know. Sometimes a fresh start is good for everyone involved, and sometimes you just need to kind of move on. I believe that's kind of where this situation had gotten to and why McClendon ultimately did end up putting his name in the portal. I believe that if he'd have come back and wanted to come back and be welcomed back, he absolutely would have. But I think guys had to be on the same page for that to happen. And I just don't know if Florida State and McClendon could have gotten there. If Norvell and his staff thought they could have made it work, though, they'd have absolutely worked towards it. And he'd have come back and been a Seminole for this upcoming season. Norvell has worked his tail off, and we've talked about it a ton in building and establishing the culture here at Florida State. And it's just too precious and it's just too valuable for him to risk that or for there to be a chink in that armor. The family, the culture, and the camaraderie just cannot be sacrificed. It's too important toward what he is ultimately building at FSU. I don't mean that to be down on any one player or say that this guy was bought in or this guy wasn't bought in or anything like that. But I do believe that that does have some to do with what went down with McClendon putting his name in the portal. And I think that ultimately you have to look at this as maybe best for both parties involved. I wish McClendon the absolute best going forward. He's a guy who absolutely got in there and crushed it on the field last year. I don't know that this is a detrimental loss, but it is definitely a loss for the Noles. I'm not going to spin it as a positive for the Noles by any means, but I do think that the Noles will be just fine, and I think McClendon will go off and have a good change of scenery and have a good career as he wraps up his college career as well. The Noles will be just fine with Verse, Payton, Edmond, Turner, Boots, Briggs if they need to grab him from the inside, and others in that defensive end room. That defensive line is still going to be a massive strength for this team and will ultimately be the difference in several games for the Noles. I haven't moved off that at all. This is not a win. It's not a positive. I'm not going to spin it that way, but I'm not concerned about the defensive line. I think you also are looking at the emergence of Darrell Jackson being an absolute star, Braden Fisk, Fabian Lovett, other guys on the inside, Farmer, that are absolute dogs, and that defensive interior is going to make the exterior's job even better. I think that the defensive line is still in really, really good shape. I think you'd like to have avoided this loss. I'm not going to spin it as a positive, but I still think the Noles are in really, really good shape here. And I think the culture of the team probably stays intact, which is the most important takeaway. We've talked about how Mike Norvell is trying to build this thing on culture, much like Coach Bowden did. I think that this keeps that intact as well. Make sure that you smash that subscribe button. Sign up to be a member if you want to support the channel in any way, or if you want access to that inside info like we kind of introduced to our Patreon members and told them about this early. If you want to see our two most recent interviews with both Jake Norris of No Offseason Sports and Ingram Smith of The Battle's End on NIL, you can click either of these two links.